So, there's a guy named Bob Buford, and Bob Buford was a person from Texas who built a cable news company from scratch into this multi-million-dollar company. And he did all of that, it was worth well into the hundreds of millions of dollars. All of that he did in Texas by the time he was 41. And if you're older than 41, imagine that, right? You're 41 and you're the CEO of this major media corporation. And it was this really crucial time for him. He got to this point in his life where he took stock and he stepped back and he began to think about what had just happened. He had achieved success way faster than he'd ever planned. And yet he had this voice in his head and this voice coming to him that he felt like was from God. And he felt like that God was saying, I need you, I want you to do something different with this second half of your life, with the rest of your life. And so through this process, Bob Buford ended up investing everything that he had into a couple of different areas with the rest of his life. One of those areas was in leadership in business. And so he began to pour resources into helping business leaders figure out what it looks like to take that next step in their life and what it looks like to have not only success but have a meaningful life. And he also spent a lot of that fortune pouring it into the church. He decided, well, I want to see churches rise up and get behind amazing leaders in the church. And so he created an organization, the first one called Halftime. And Halftime is an organization that works with folks that are at this halfway point in their life and trying to figure out what does it look like for this next period of my life to have significance in my life. The other organization that he founded and led is something that you may not have ever heard of. It's called Leadership Network. And you may not have ever heard of it, but you've actually experienced its effects if you've ever been a part of a contemporary church, because they are behind the scenes in a lot of different ways, training and helping pastors lead church as well. And so every church that you've ever been a part of, that I've ever been a part of, has been affected by what he did when he got to this point in his life. Now his goal, what he said was his goal with it, he says, my goal is that my last check will bounce. Like the last check that I write will bounce. In other words, my goal is to give every single thing away. Here's one of the things that he said in his book called Halftime. He said this, he said, the key to a successful second half is not a change of jobs. It is a change of heart. A change in the way you view the world and order your life. Interesting. There's another quote I want to show you from President Harry Truman, actually, which goes right along with what Bob Buford did with his life. It says this, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. Right? So we're in this series and we're concluding it today called Not Today, Satan. And here's what we've been saying. It's kind of a front-on view with this. Satan doesn't have to possess you to win in your life. If he can get you to think more about yourself than others, you never see outside of your own little me world, and you can live in this little kind of me existence for your whole life. And if that happens, he wins. If that happens, he wins. Now, there are a lot of people like the Bob Bufords of the world who have climbed the ladder of success and have climbed into this place, and they've realized, oh my goodness, there's something more to life than this. And they would look at us if we were pursuing our own little me world, and they would go, well, you're not really going to accomplish much. Martin Luther King said it like this. He said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing? Not for yourself. What are you doing for others? That's life's most persistent and urgent question, he said. Now, in spite of what you may have been brought up to believe, people who have lived their lives well have found that the path towards success is not this path upward. It's not just up and to the right. You talk to any successful person in your life, and they will probably end up saying, yeah, I realized at some point that it wasn't just upwards in success, that the path towards meaning always led downwards. It always was not an ascent, but it was more of a descent. It always meant leading towards people, not away from people. It always meant the pathway to success was me getting connected with other people in my life and figuring out how to help them. The pathway from success to significance is not up and to the right. So it's like asking two different questions. What's best for me? Or what's best for the people around me? Now let me say this to back up for a second. All of Christianity is founded around not an idea, but an event. It's built not around just some idea that's out there, but it's built around what we believe is a real historical event. And the event is this, that Jesus is God's Son, that he came into the world. He came on a mission to save a lost and dying world. He went to the cross. He was crucified, he was dead and buried, and on the third day he rose from the dead. He stole the keys to hell, he defeated death, and he ascended to heaven. Now, we don't assume that everybody automatically buys that. I know maybe in your church experience in the past, you've been in places where it seems like everybody's on the same. We don't assume that here. And you know what? If you're here and you're just exploring, you're kicking the tires of this thing called faith, you're trying to figure out if God's even real, we are so glad you're here. There's a space for you here. There's a place for you here. There's a place for you to serve here. There's a place for you to plug in. There's a place for you to belong while you're figuring out what you believe. We don't assume that everybody always buys that. But when you do, when you make a decision, here's what we believe. That you begin to move from insignificance into meaning. And that this thing that's called amazing grace, how sweet the sound, right? This thing that's called amazing grace is a gift for you. It's a gift for you to receive. It's not just something that you earn, but it's something that's given to you out of love and compassion for you. And so, here's what I wonder, like if that's true, if those things are true, and I would say I believe that those things are true, isn't it amazing that Jesus came how he did? Like, why did he come how he did to this world? He didn't come as like this Mark Zuckerberg kind of guy, this like tech multi-zillionaire, successful and rich, and someone who, had so much by the world's standards. He didn't come like that. He didn't come as this king, or this politician, or this significant religious leader with this incredible following built in. He didn't come like that, and sometimes I wonder why. Why, Jesus, didn't you come like that? Some of his followers wondered that too. In fact, they tried early on to make him king. They tried to take him and put him into that place by force. There's a passage in the book of John. It's actually right after he feeds the 5,000. There's this miracle that we're going to talk about next month because we're doing a series on Jesus and his miracles next month, by the way. And so get ready for that. If you have questions about his miracles, if you wonder if that even really happened, or if you're looking for a miracle in your own life and you're trying to ask God for that, be present in that series because we're going to crack that open. But there's this place where he does this miracle and his followers try to take him. It says they tried to forcefully make him king. And then he slipped away because he's like, no, that is not what I'm about. That is not what is going on here. And maybe that's actually why God chose a different strategy in the first place. Because if he came as a king, if he came as a politician, if he came as some super wealthy person, maybe all of that extra wouldn't help what he was trying to accomplish. Maybe, in fact, it would actually hurt and distract. Because the path to the top for most of those people in that day, for kings, for politicians, for religious leaders, the path to the top, and this is true in our day as well, the path to the top, you know how you get there? There's a guy in front of me, I'm going to yank him down, and I'm going to climb over him. Like, that's the path to success. And everybody knew that, and those are the people that the masses followed, right? And so that's just kind of how it worked, because if I don't do that first, somebody else is going to do that for me. Did you ever play King of the Mountain when you were a kid? If you're a kid right now, did you play King of the Mountain? That's a simple game. I'm at the top of a hill. I find the biggest hill in my neighborhood. I get all my friends, and if I'm king of the mountain, you're down there trying to pull me off. And the game is you come after me, and I just like kick you and throw you back down the hill. And I'm king of the mountain until you replace me, until you come and grab my leg and attack me and yank me down the mountain. Then all of a sudden, you're the king of the mountain. I got to climb up the mountain, but there can only be one king of the mountain. We've all played that game. That's what the world that Jesus came into was like. And so it starts to explain why maybe he didn't come as a king, why maybe he didn't come as some politician or some ultra mega zillionaire. He was born to an unwed mother in a stable. In a stable. We think about that. We struggle to sometimes think about it because it's so almost mythological. We believe that it actually happened, but the story itself is just so like out there, we almost don't think about it. He was born to an unwed mother in a stable around animals because they didn't have the clout to get into the inn. That's where he was born. He was a carpenter's son, not very glamorous. Sometimes we think, oh, that's kind of unfortunate. Like, I wish Jesus I feel sorry for him, right? I kind of wish he had a better start to everything. But I believe it was actually strategic. It was strategic. He was unswayed by the trappings of everything, which, like I said, confused his followers. They were coming around saying, don't you want to be king? Like, isn't that the plan here? Aren't you taking over? Isn't that what is going on? Isn't that what this is all about? But he knew what all of us eventually would discover, and it's this. That there's a ladder that we climb in life. There's a ladder that all of us are on almost by default, especially because of where we're born, especially because we live in Western culture in a very rich society, especially because we live in the United States. And we automatically, almost all of us automatically end up on this one ladder, and it is the ladder called success. We start to climb this at an early age. We start to get put on this by our culture, by our society, maybe by our parents, but we start to take steps on this ladder. And some of you find yourself on this ladder right now, and you're maybe at the very bottom, but you're on the ladder. You're working your way up. And the goal is success, and that success can look like a lot of things. It can look like business success, for sure. It can look like financial success. It can look like relational success. It can look like a lot of different things, but we want to succeed. We want to get to the top, and maybe you have your own version of what that looks like, but the truth is, by default, we're all on this ladder. Now, some of you may be there, some of you may be kind of in the middle somewhere, right in the middle. You know, you're not quite at the top, you're not at the bottom anymore, but you're somewhere in between. You certainly haven't made it up, and occasionally, some of us get up here. And maybe some of you know people who are up here. Now, the interesting thing about that is this. Jesus knew, coming into this world, that there was this ladder that existed, and all of us are on it, like I said, by default. But you know what else he knew? There was a different ladder. That there's a different ladder. And unless we recognize it, we'll never see it. But he came to help us understand this, that there is another ladder, and the other ladder is not about success, it's about significance. In Bob Buford's story, in his life, he climbed this ladder, and he was one of the very few who got to the top, and he got to a point where he realized, oh my goodness, it's not as fulfilling as I thought it would be up here. It's not as rewarding as I felt like it would be. It's actually kind of lonely up here, and maybe, just maybe, I'm on the wrong ladder. And so, to his credit, as God worked in his life, he began to recognize, okay, I got to make sure that I get onto this other ladder, the one called significance. Now, Jesus came to help us understand that you don't have to pursue success without meaning any longer, but you're either on one path or the other. You're not at the beginning anymore where you can make a choice. Let's just say that. Like, you haven't started. You've already begun. And like I said, you're probably on this one if you haven't intentionally said, I'm going to be on that. You're probably on the ladder of success if you haven't intentionally said, I want to be on the one that is about significance. Now, there's not anything wrong with success in and of itself, but the problem is this. This without that equals emptiness. And many, many people have come before you and experienced that. So if there's something in your head that says, I don't think I believe that. I actually think there's a lot of that I can experience when I climb and get to the top of this ladder. I would just encourage you to look around a little bit and to begin to understand what other people who have gotten to this point have actually said, because what you typically find out is that they've either had an awful fall from the top or they have realized, I'm actually on the wrong ladder. I got to get off before it's too late. The problem is this: success without significance equals emptiness. Jesus understood this. That's why he came into the world how he did. And he also was someone who told a lot of stories about this. So many of his stories that he told, so much of his words were about the difference between success and significance. Now, he told one particular story that I want to tell you this morning from the book of Luke, chapter 12. He talked about this so much. I want to share with you. It's a parable, and a parable is just a modern day retelling of a story. And a parable is what he used a lot to talk to people about truth. And so here's what he says when it comes to success versus significance. And it starts in Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Here's how it goes. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" So you see what's going on. Someone calls out in the middle of the crowd, "Hey, help me figure out where the money should go in our family." And Jesus is like, "Why do you want me to do this?" But then he says this, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he starts out his story. He doesn't even get into the story yet, but he starts it out by saying that. And what he's doing is he's taking a flag and he's planting it right in your heart and in my heart. And he's saying life doesn't consist with an abundance of possessions. This is a truth. He's saying you need to understand this. And you discover this at different points in your life. And I discover this at different points in your life, sometimes more clearly than others. But often it's when someone is sick, there's a diagnosis, so you go visit a family member in the hospital, or somebody has a financial struggle, or you have a financial, you feel like you're right on the edge of exploding, or there's a relationship issue that's a huge breakdown in your life, and you get to this point where you recognize that life, when it gets real, you don't care about the stuff anymore. You don't care about it. There's a very clarifying thing that happens when you go through pain, when you go through something difficult. You don't care. You could take all your stuff and just put it in a room in your house and lock the door and forget about it. The house could burn down. It's fine, because you know what? You've got more important things to deal with. There's something about difficulty in our life that makes us prioritize things really clearly. And Jesus is saying, hey, this is a truth that you need to latch onto, that life doesn't consist of an abundance of possessions. It's not about stuff. It's not. Sometimes we take that to mean that Jesus doesn't want us to have anything. That's not what he's going to say. There's a pastor named Rick Warren who says this as well at the beginning of his book, The Purpose-Driven Life. He says simply this: it's not about you. That's how his book starts. It's not about you. It's not about you. So Jesus begins to tell him this story. Here's what he says. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And so Jesus, right at the beginning of this story, he says, there's a guy who had a lot. Now, does he condemn the guy because he had a lot? No. No. The question he asks is a different question. He doesn't ask, should he have a lot or should he have a little? A lot of cultures, a lot of societies, a lot of political movements, all kinds of things have tried to ask that question. Jesus is not asking that question. He's not judging the guy on how much or little he has. He just happens to say, here's a rich guy. He has an abundance. Here's the question: what shall I do? What do I do now? Not should I have had a lot, but what do I do with it now? God is not about the amount, but the motivation. He is not about the amount. He is about the motivation behind it. What shall I do? Gets to the heart of the matter. And it gets to this understanding of, is he going to be one of those guys who says life is about an abundance of possessions, or it's not? This is where the rubber meets the road for this guy in the story. What shall I do? Here's how this man answers it. This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. This guy is so much like us. Like, this is why I love this guy in the Bible, because he's so much like me. He's so much like you. This is our answer. Oh, I got a lot. Well, I better get more space to store it. I got to build a bigger barn, right? Because that's the obvious answer. I've got a lot. I better build a bigger house. It's like our answer, right? And so this is what I'll do. I will build bigger barns. I will store my surplus grain. And then he says, I will say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, what Jesus is doing is he's referring to a very, very prevalent Greek philosophy of the time, which basically said this: let's eat and drink, for tomorrow, anybody know this? We die. That's right. Jesus is referring to that. Let's eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. That was a Greek philosophy then. Do you know how prevalent that philosophy is today? It is like what so many of us buy into and so many of us live for. Let's eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. There's no future. There's no eternity. There's nothing to plan for. It's just about the here and now. It's just about us. So that's what the man said. Take life easy. Let me eat and drink and be merry. And this is where you get to when you say a lot of sentences to yourself and you have a lot of thoughts and a lot of actions that use the word me and I and mine. This is the place that we get to. I'm earning this. I want this. I need to get to this point if I want to be where I want to be, and then I'll be able to fill in the blank. Then I'll be able to get, then I'll be able to, but I got to get mine first. That's where a lot of us get to. But let's see how the story concludes. But God said to him, you fool. That's a harsh word, isn't it? You ever call anybody a fool? I hope not, really. You know what a fool is from a Bible's perspective? It's not someone who's dumb. It's not someone who doesn't know any better. You know what a fool is? A fool is somebody who knows the truth and doesn't do anything about it. That's what a fool is. So he says, you're a fool. You know what to do when you're not doing it. This very night, God says, your life will be demanded from you. And then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich toward God. Jesus is saying that focusing on the right thing is everything. Focusing on the right thing is everything. Your motivation, where your heart is, focusing on the right thing is actually everything. Now, let me say a couple of things about what selfishness is and isn't, and what selflessness doesn't mean, actually. Let me talk about what selflessness doesn't mean. Because selflessness is being able to look towards others and put others in front of yourself. Let me say a couple of things about what this doesn't mean, because I think that sometimes we get it confused with other things. One of the things that it doesn't mean, listen, is this: giving up what's uniquely you. It doesn't mean you have to give up what's uniquely you. Sometimes people say, oh, I need to be less selfish, and so I need to be more like the most selfless person that I know, and so I'm going to figure out who that is, and I'm going to try to be exactly like them. And so we try to mimic their personality, we try to mimic their gifts, we try to ignore the things that are uniquely you, and we basically just try to become somebody else. The goal is not to become somebody else. The goal is to give away what you have to other people. So you're responsible for you. And my friends who are like students in the room, if you're a kid, like if you're in middle school, you're in elementary school, you're in high school right now, here's what we need, and this goes for you adults too. We need for you to discover you. We need you to discover who you are, who God has uniquely created you to be, because that is a unique fingerprint on this world, and that's not so we can pat you on the back. I mean, we're going to pat you on the back. We love you, okay? But it's so that you can glorify God with your gifts. It's so that you can point the world to Jesus. It's so that you can shine a light, that He can take a light and shine it really through your life into the unique place that you live and go to school and are going to work and go to all these things that you're going to do so that He can be glorified because of your gifts given up to Him. We need that to happen because we need you in this world making a difference. This world needs you. He created you for a reason. So be the best you. I mean, I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but you got to be the best person you can be because of what God wants to do through you. He wants to take it and multiply it. He wants to multiply it out. So selflessness doesn't mean giving up yourself. It also doesn't mean losing your voice. You have a voice. You need to discover it. You need to use it. We need you to use your voice. Do you know what I mean by that? You have a unique perspective on life. You've been given gifts. You've been given both struggles and successes for a reason. We need you to speak up. There are people around you who need you to speak up, who can't speak for themselves. You're in a position of privilege. Use it to help other people, not just yourself. This is okay. This is okay, but only if you're pursuing this. Use your voice. It doesn't mean you don't get to use your voice, that you have to be silent. That's not what selflessness means. It also doesn't mean allowing yourself to get run over. You know how that happens in your life sometimes, where people run over you with the bus, and then they back it up, and they run back over you again and again. And sometimes we think in the Christian world, some of us in a weird kind of way think, oh, we just got to take it. That's what it's all about. It's not what it's all about. There is dying to yourself, yes, and humility, absolutely. That doesn't mean you allow people to run over you without speaking up. It also doesn't mean that you just push away success. Selflessness doesn't just mean you try not to succeed. In fact, I think Jesus loves entrepreneurs. I just think if you look through the Bible, He tells all kinds of stories about people that are investing. He tells all kinds of stories about people that are investing, and I think He has a special place in His heart for people who are investing in things, people who are trying to grow things. He told stories about it all the time, and you may not be a business investor, but you can be a kingdom investor. You can be someone who invests yourself into the kingdom and sees growth as a result of that. Because at its core, investing, being an entrepreneurial kind of person, takes the ability to see beyond yourself. I mentioned Grace Church Charlotte a few minutes ago, but we made a small investment there and just a little piece of that story. But that is expressing itself in incredible growth. People at the beginning of this church made a small investment and it's expressing itself in incredible growth. You have the capacity to do that. But you got to get to a point where you're saying, I just want to be someone who has significance as my story and not just success. Not just success. I want to tell you 3 different ways to shut down selfishness in your life. I just want to encourage you in these 3 ways. There are a lot of ways to do it, but I want to encourage you in these 3 things. Okay? One of them is this. Develop your concern for others. Begin to develop your concern for others. The reason I say that is because we just live in this bubble where it can become all about me. And it works in a couple different ways, actually. If you're feeling like you're in a really successful place in life right now, whether that's with your career, with your family, with your financial situation, whatever it is, you're feeling really successful, that can lead you to kind of focus inward more and more and more on me. Now, if you're struggling in any of those things, that actually can lead you to a place where you're focusing more and more and more on me too, because you're scrambling. Let me encourage you to develop your concern for others. Here's a question to help you do that. Who are 3 people today in my life who need my attention, my help, or my resources? Who are 3 people in my life today who need my attention, they need my help, they need my resources? They might just need you to listen to them, right? They might just need you to step out of yourself and slow down for a minute and just listen. They might need you to just ask a question. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. No, really, how are you doing? It takes some intentionality to do that, and it takes me stepping outside of myself to do that, because I don't know about you, but I got a running monologue in my head. I got a running list of things going on. I know you got it going on right now. Don't even try like you don't. You do. I do it too. And it's like, I got a grocery list, I got things to do, I got this, I got that, I got blah, blah, blah. Can you stop that for a minute and be present with somebody? Who around you might need your attention today? Who around you also might just need your help? You just might need to go do something for them. It might be your neighbor, might be a friend, might be somebody who mentioned something in passing and you're still thinking about it a little bit, like they have a need or something happened in their life and they could really use a pat on the back, they could really use a note, they could really use a text, they really use your presence in their life. Maybe there's resources that you have that you can help somebody with, like you've got a need around you and you could be that person who meets a need in a really crazy way. You know how cool it is to be able to do stuff like that? That might be you today. Who are 3 people in your life today who need that from me? Develop your concern for others. The second one is a little harder, but very, very important. Be open to correction. Would you just allow yourself to be open to correction? Like when you make an honest mistake, would you be open to correction? This will help you in your selflessness. This will help you shut down selfishness if you're open to correction in your life. It takes a little bit of humility, doesn't it? It takes a little bit of, I got to get off of, like, I got to get out of the way and all, I got to kind of put myself down a little bit so I can listen to what you have to say. Here's a question for you with that. Am I listening to those who try to correct me? Or do I have my defensiveness up and I just kind of shut them down? Am I listening to those in my workplace who are trying to correct me? Am I listening to those who are in my friend group who are trying to correct me? Am I listening to those who are in my family? Could be the hardest place, where they're trying to correct me. Am I open to that? It'll tell you how you're doing with your selfishness level. Third one's this, and I think it's the hardest one, but it could do the most good. Be quick to confess when necessary. Be quick to confess. And this is when you have willfully been selfish in your life and in your world, and someone else has suffered because of it. Be quick to confess. Question here is this: do I want to get better or do I just want to stay bitter? Do I want to get better or do I want to stay bitter? If I want to get better, I'm going to be open to other people's critique and I'm going to be open to the fact that I might have hurt somebody that I need to apologize to. I need to confess to. I need to go say, hey, will you forgive me? I just really screwed that up and I need you to know that. It puts you in a place of an open hand and being, having to receive something from somebody, and it's vulnerable, and it's humbling, and it's really, really good because it helps you move through selfishness and step into this different place. But if you want to stay bitter, don't do it. Shut it down. Just ignore it. Ignore the fact that you've hurt somebody in it. Just keep going forward, because what that does is it builds this little cocoon around your heart. And you begin to get bitter. Now, if you're in a place right now where you're just feeling levels of bitterness in your heart, in your life, I would ask you this question. Is there something that you need to confess to someone else that you haven't? Now, bitterness is not always about that, but it could be that you've got a place in your life where you just need to own up to the fact that you've hurt somebody and you need to be willing to confess that and move on. That will help you shut down selfishness in your life. So when Bob Buford was 41, you know what happened to him? He had a friend. His friend came along and he was in the middle of this point where he had stepped back from that great success in his life and he started to ask these questions. What am I doing, with the rest of it? And this friend came along, and this friend asked him this question. He basically said, hey, okay, list out everything in your life right now that you care about. What is it? And he started to list out things like his career, his relationships, financial success, Jesus. Put Jesus in there too. And he listed out a bunch of other things. And his friend began to help him see that there's this box in his life. His life has a box. And there's really only one thing that can go in that box. We want to try to put 2 things or 3 things or whatever in the box, but there's only one thing that can go into that box. And so his friend began to ask him, hey, what are the things that you need to take away? And he finally ended up on that list. He had financial success and Jesus. It's like he told his buddy that these are the 2 things. And his friend said, yeah, only one of them can go in the box that is your life. And so very, very wisely, Bob Buford put Jesus in the box. He said, whatever else happens in my life, that's primary. Whatever else happens to me, this is what I'm going to be about. This is what I'm going to be about. It feels so hard in the moment to make that choice. But he said over and over and over again in his life that he was so glad that he did. So you know what happened? Jesus was in that box, and he took everything else, all those other things, and he began to work them out. And he began to bless in some ways that he never could have predicted. So all of these things began to crop up in his life. He started this organization called Halftime, which is incredibly successful at helping business leaders figure out, what do I do to move from success to significance? What do I do if I've been climbing this ladder and I've gotten to the top and I've realized, oh my gosh, I've been climbing the wrong ladder. How do I get off of that and onto this place where I'm pursuing significance in my life? So the question really is for you and me. You got a box. There's only one thing that can go in it. What is that going to be? Because you really can't do both. Is it Jesus or is it something else? You can climb this ladder all you want to, but I just promise you that you're going to get to a point at some point, hopefully it's not at the top where you just fall off and crash, but you're going to figure out that this is an empty pathway if it doesn't involve that. But when you begin to pursue the steps of significance, and that starts with putting Jesus in that box, you're going to see all of this you want to see and more. And God's going to take what you have. And that's not just financial, it's relationships, it's influence, and he's going to multiply that in your world. For his glory, not yours. And I would say that's a life of significance. Will you pray with me this morning? Can I invite you to do that? And I want to invite you to consider what's in your box. Let's pray. God, each of us has a life in here. It's so valuable. I think sometimes we don't recognize how valuable it really is. The minutes, the seconds, the hours in our day. The fact that every person here is a human soul that you deeply, deeply love so much that you came and you died for us. And that you're inviting us into this life not just of success. It's just not high enough of a goal for us, but into a life of significance. And so the invitation that we have before us is that who's going to be in that box? What's going to be in that box in our lives? Maybe it's enough for some of us today to just recognize that, oh my gosh, my life is like that, and here's what I have in my box right now. It may be enough for some of us today, it's enough to just be able to take inventory, to take stock, and to say, I got to consider my relationship with God. And maybe for others in this room, recognizing today that I got other things in this box and I'm ready to empty that box and put Jesus in and let him determine everything else. And if that's where you are today, the invitation is simply to say yes. It's simply to say yes. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to have life all perfect. You'll never get it together. Trust me. All you really have to do to start is to say yes and surrender. And there's others of us in this room who have said yes to you, God, and we just need the clarifying moment. And we need to ask the question again, what shall I do? I have these resources, I have these gifts, I have an abundance of abilities, an abundance of gifts, an abundance of things in my life. What do I do with them now, God? And may we lay them at your feet and give them up to you. Thank you for moving and working in this room. And we pray this in the mighty, mighty name of Jesus. Amen.